Don't be afraid. You know you're gonna wake up in the morning. To run to him. You ain't getting over him. I got no rules, I got I keep pushing forward, but he keeps pulling me backwards. Now I'm standing back from it. I finally see the pattern.
All right, so it's about 12:05, so I think we'll go ahead and get started. Welcome everyone. Happy Monday. I hope you're starting your week off well. And we are going to be starting our week off well at today's Taste Talk. We actually have a Taste Talk almost every day this week, so it's really exciting, a lot going on. And I am super excited to kick it off with gnocchi today with Chef Chris Quirk. So Chef, please take it away.
Take it away. Okay. Well, welcome everybody. Happy Monday. Happy post-Mother's Day. Mother's Day was an interesting day yesterday, and I would like to have been able to make this for my mom, but she's, she's speaking of retirement facility. She's in a retirement facility up in Madison. All right. That's right. Don't bring the energy down at work. That's what they said. So we're going to do potato gnocchi today. I do potato gnocchi more often than I do, say, French gnocchi, which are made with a variation on pâte à choux, which is flour and milk and butter and whipped eggs, right? And then that's piped into boiling water, just cutting them off the end of the piping bag as they go in. And they're very light, they're very fluffy, and they're great for some things. There's also bread gnocchi, which you may have heard of or may not have, right? Which is using stale bread and herbs and maybe bacon or pancetta and some egg to bind everything together. And that makes a terrific gnocchi as well. And maybe we could do that one a different day. My wife is like, yeah, you should make bread gnocchi. And I was like, yeah, I should make bread gnocchi. I haven't made that in a while, especially with all the artisan bread she's been making in the house lately. But today we're going to do potato gnocchi, which probably going to be the most common gnocchi you find in groceries or wherever, right? You can find them frozen. You can find them shelf stable. I find that most of the pre-fed gnocchi that you're going to buy tend to be pretty chewy, right? Not fluffy, tender, and light, the way I like a gnocchi to be. So we're going to go through this, and I'm going to give you a really quick tutorial on how to make them. I'll take you through making them, and then I'll show you a nice quick finish, okay? So I had to get started about an hour ago. The longest part of making the gnocchi, of course, is having the potatoes cooked. Now you can use potato flour or instant mashed potatoes, if you want to call it instant mashed potatoes. You can use that instead of regular whole potatoes. I don't usually, but I have in a pinch. Okay, so I would prefer that if you're going to make potato gnocchi, the type of potato is actually going to be important. You don't want to use red potatoes. Yukon Gold potatoes don't work particularly well because those tend to be a little bit waxier. So once you cook them, the flesh tends to be a little bit smooth, right? You want to use high starch baking potatoes. So russet potatoes, perfect for this, right? They're cheap, they're easy, and they work just the way you're wanting them to. Okay, so I got some russet potatoes here. Gave them about 45 minutes in the oven. Now, you may say, well, couldn't we just peel them and mash them, cook them on water and mash them? Yes, you could do that, but there's a problem with that, right? If you're going to cook the potatoes in water, you're going to add a fair amount of moisture to the potato. And the more moisture is in the potato, the more flour you have to use to finish the gnocchi. The more flour you're going to use, the chewier the gnocchi is going to be at the end, okay?
So, Chef, if you wanted to make your gnocchi gluten-free, what would you recommend as your substitution for the flour? Cornstarch, potato starch, a gluten-free flour?
Okay, since eggs are actually providing the biggest part of the binding for the gnocchi, you could use rice flour. I think rice flour is gluten-free, pretty sure. Potato starch, you could, but you need something that's going to dry the potato out to some degree, right? I don't think you could get away with using 100% potato starch, potato flour, but maybe you could. Actually, that's a really good question. But I think, again, since the eggs are providing most of the binding in the dough, that you could probably get away with using almost any other flour other than wheat flour.
Okay.
It's conjecture on my part, but I'm thinking that's probably a pretty good conjecture. So now, want to cook the potatoes until they're soft. I mean, they've been out for about 10-15 minutes so that I can handle these without burning my hands. If you find they're too hot, you want to use a pad to hold these while you're working with them.
I'm sorry, is there a microwave hack for the potatoes that could speed up this process?
Yes, you can use the microwave. Now, the problem with the microwave is you got to turn the potatoes around a few times to make sure that they're cooked evenly, right? Because in the microwave, sometimes you're going to find you have hard spots or uncooked spots inside the potato. Also, you have to make sure in a microwave that you put some little air holes or steam holes in the potatoes, because potato microwave, if it doesn't have any way for the steam to escape, can explode very nicely and you'd be cleaning your microwave for a couple of days. But you also want to work with the potatoes while they're still pretty hot, because as they start to cool down, the starches start to change a little bit, and they may get gluey on you. That's why red potatoes, you don't want to use them anyway, because they get gluier than heck. But these can get gluey too, so you want to work with them while they're hot. Also, when you're working with them while they're hot, as they're cooling off, right, they're going to continue to lose moisture, and that's really the important thing. So I'm just going to go ahead and cut the potato in half. Now I have food mill, and I'm just going to come up here and show you. Basic food mill, okay, very nice. You don't have to use a food mill. Just so happens I have one. You can use a box grater and just simply grate the potatoes. That works too, okay? I'm going to, instead of peeling this peel off the potato, I'm just going to take the potato, cut it in half, you see here, and then just scrape the flesh into the food mill, okay? And it looks nice and dry right now. Looking at this, it looks beautiful, okay? And you can reserve those potato skins for later, right? A little cheese, a little chorizo in the oven. You know, make a little snack with the kids. I'm gonna save those. I've got several potatoes here, so I'm gonna make enough gnocchi dough for a couple pounds of gnocchis. They are hot. So I'm just into the food mill. Okay. Oh, hot. My hands are pretty used to the temp, so I'm not too worried about that. So now I'm going to go ahead and start ricing this onto my board. Okay, spread it out. Because the more you spread it as it cools, the more moisture is going to come out of the potato. Okay, very nice. Now I'm going to do a little bit more potato. Okay. I love these things. Used to make these for the cafe occasionally when we did when I had enough hands. Because if we were doing gnocchi for dinner, we were hand making our gnocchi, we'd have to make, you know, like 400 or 500 of these guys. So. Scrape it out, nice. Last one, and then we're done with this part. Once we got all the potato riced onto the surface, then we're going to start adding our other ingredients in layers. Okay, and I'll show you that in just a sec. Okay, because gnocchis are super simple. Potato gnocchi, super simple. Potatoes, of course, being the main ingredient. My old food mill is starting to break. I'm afraid I'm gonna have to get a new one of these years. Maybe this will be a great impetus for that. Okay, so I'm gonna bring my board up and just give you guys a quick look. So here you can see I've got the potato riced out onto the board, just spread out for the most part. So again, you can use a box grater, or you can even run it through something, you know, if you've got something like a strainer with the holes, right? You can just push that through by hand. That works too, right? I've done it several different ways. And I'm just gonna make sure this is all spread out nice. Okay. Make sure my potatoes are all up on the board. Okay. Next, little salt. Okay. So it's a little kosher salt. I'm going to sprinkle it over. You want to season gnocchi at more than one spot in the cooking process. Obviously, you want to do it right now when you're putting them together. So you've got some salt in the dough. When you go to cook them in your pot, right after a little while, I'll show you that. We've got some salt in the water too. And then you're going to want to taste the gnocchi. Once you've got them in the pan, you're going to want to try one and see where it's at in terms of seasoning, because you may want to add a little additional salt on the end, okay? Because the dough and it's all by itself doesn't taste like much, right? It's going to be potato, which we got here. And then we're going to use some all-purpose flour, okay? And some eggs. Now for the 5 potatoes that I had, for the 5 potatoes that I had, I'm going to use, I think 2 eggs is probably going to be sufficient. So looking at this amount of potato on the board, 2 eggs will be all right. Okay, so crack my egg. I always do that on a flat surface, right? Don't crack into a corner because it tends to have, you tend to have more eggshell come off. All right, so we're just going to drop that right on top. 2 eggs. Now, I'm going to go with the flour. So, gnocchi, part of this is going to be subjective, part of this is objective, right? So, you're going to have to look at the dough when you start putting it together and see if you think it looks dry enough. And that's, I know that sounds a little iffy, but depending on the moisture content of your potatoes, you may have to add more flour or less flour. In this case, you know, we'll see how much is actually going to go in. But for those 5 potatoes, and I'd say that's about maybe 18 ounces, 2 pounds of potatoes total. All right, so there goes a ½ cup of flour. That just covers the surface. I'm going to give it another ½ cup here, enough so that I've got about a good 1/4 inch cover. Now that may not be enough, but we'll see. Next, I'm going to take my bench scraper. So I'll show you this one. Right, come up nice and close. So I got my bench scraper. All right, it's flat edge. And that's what I'm going to use to mix my gnocchi up. So I'm just going to fold it together. I'm folding it into where the eggs are. Right, fold, chop through it. Fold it in, chop it in. Okay. This way, we're breaking the eggs and mixing it through. I want to mix the dough as little as possible, okay? Because to get a really nice, very tender finish to the gnocchi, I don't want to develop a lot of protein in the flour itself. Part of that we're going to get because we've used potato to cut everything, right? So the amount of potato is going to be about 50% in terms of the weight of the overall dough, okay? So there's still enough flour in there that if we worked it and kneaded the heck out of it, we would have a pretty tough dough, okay?
Could you use a food processor or a blender possibly to mix that?
I find a food processor tends to overwork things. That's why I actually always, even when I'm doing large amounts of this, I always do it by hand, okay? That's not to say that you can't, but it's harder to have the control over it if you use a food processor. Now, if you have a mixer with a paddle, you can make a pretty fast gnocchi using a mixer. But again, this is my preferred method, okay? So we're just gonna kind of keep folding it. Now, once we get it to the point where the dough is starting to come together, okay, and I'll show you that in 1 second. Okay, coming back up here, and I can see this, right? So the dough is actually starting to come together, right? It's coalescing here. So we're getting somewhere with this one. Okay, so now I'm just going to basically push all this dough together. Okay, because the egg is pretty well mixed through. Okay, turn it. It's looking a little bit on the wet side, so I'm going to add a little bit of flour. Okay, turn. Scrape the little bit on the side of my cover, so scrape that off. Okay. I'm gonna flour my hands just a smidge. Okay. Now I'm just going to push the dough together. Now I said you don't want to knead it much, right? But you're going to knead it a little bit. You need to knead. Right? You need to knead at least a little, because if you don't, you're going to have pockets where you don't have everything completely mixed. Okay. Yeah, use the bench scraper to everything up off the board and into the dough ball. Okay. Now I'm going to bring the dough ball over. Dough. Beautiful. Right, so I'm pushing my finger into it. It needs a little bit more work, not much though, because I can see some streak of egg through here and some streaks of flour. So I'm going to knead it just a couple more times, but I don't want it where if I push my finger in, it just pushes right back out, right? Because that means I've developed the gluten too much. If it starts to feel a little sticky, just put a little bit of flour down. Again, you want to be very sort of judicious with that, right? You don't want to put a lot because you're going to end up with a chewy mess. Just a little bit. Gently, gently. It's almost like working biscuit dough, right? You want to be very gentle. Okay, beautiful. Okay. So now the dough is even in color, right? I'm not seeing any streaks of white or yellow. Okay, I got a little foreign body in there. That's probably from the potato. I had one that had a little void in the middle. You know, where you get a little dark spot on the inside, a little opening. So I might have gotten a little bit in there. I'm just going to roll it around in the flour to keep it from sticking. Now I'm going to clean up my space a little bit here. And then we're going to go to the next step. Yeah, you see how fast that comes together, right? This is pretty quick. Now I'm going to keep using my my bench scraper as my main tool. First, I'm going to get my hands cleaned off though, because now if the dough is formed, it shouldn't be that sticky. So give me just a second here. Then I'm going to get the old hands good dry, because again, we don't want to add any moisture. We don't want this to start getting sticky again. So, dry. Okay. Is everybody okay with this so far? Any questions?
No, I think they're good right now.
Okay, I'd like to make one more comment about this. Now, normally when you make a regular pasta dough, you're going to make the dough, you're going to let it rest, okay? But you got to let it rest because what you do with regular pasta dough is you develop the proteins as much as you can, right? So the dough, if it hasn't rested and you try to roll it out, it may tear, right? Or it may just spring back, right? Or both. With gnocchi dough, because you really haven't developed the protein in the dough, you can go ahead and work with it right away. And actually, if you were to say, make the dough today and want to work with it tomorrow, because of what's going on with the starches in the potato and the amount of moisture that's still in this dough, it's a pretty high moisture dough, right? You may find that it gets so slack and sticky that it may be hard to work with. So you may end up having to add more flour if you let it rest overnight, okay? So I prefer to work with it just right away. Now, I'm gonna cut this into a couple of pieces. I'm just gonna put some of the dough aside for later, okay? But I got 2 chunks here. These are about, they're about 6 or 8 ounces each, okay? We're gonna take a little more flour. And the flour we're using now isn't so much for making the dough, it's for keeping the dough from sticking to itself. You can also use rice flour or cornstarch, right? Rice flour or cornstarch, either one really absorbs water at all, right? So if you're using wheat flour, you know, after a while it'll get sticky too, right? So if you ever made pasta, you roll out your pasta and you let it, you know, you put it in a little pile and it looks perfect. 30 minutes later you come back and it's just like one big gooey mess. Mostly that's because the flour that you use is picking up some moisture from the pasta dough and from the air, right? And so it ends up turning into goo. So you just want to make this, a pretty fast process. So I'm just going to take this stuff and roll it out into a snake. So I'm just rolling it gently with my hands, and you can see maybe, I'm hoping you can see, that my hands as I'm rolling on them are starting to spread a little bit. Start in the center, spread to the edges, just gently. Okay. Now, I'm gonna make a snake. Snakes in the kitchen is not like snakes on a plane. You know. All right. So now I've got this. Bring my little snake right up here where you can see. Again, my little snake. It's about as thick as my thumb, right? So maybe 3/4 of an inch across. That's a real nice size. Okay. So now I'm going to flour my pan over here a little bit, because again, I don't want the gnocchi to stick to itself or to the pan that I'm going to put it on. Now go back, take your bench cutter, and you're going to cut this in about 3/4 inch squares. So I'm just going to go through and cut. Okay, nice. Bring a couple of these up here, and I'm going to show you a couple things. If you don't want to go to the next step, and all you want to do is cook this and eat it because, hey, you want to get this on the plate for the kids, okay? You could take it at this step and cook them off. If you want to do that and you want to hold them for dinner, say you got a dinner party coming on Saturday and you want to have these things ready, you can't make them today and put them in the refrigerator and expect them to last. But they will freeze very, very well. And in fact, cooking them from frozen is my ideal go-to for this, right? Make them today, put them in the freezer, cook them from frozen. I'm not exactly sure why that works so well, but it does, okay? So right now, as they're shaped, they're not beautiful, right? So I'll show you a couple of these things. They're not gorgeous, but they don't look bad. Okay, they're a nice size. Okay. So here we go, right there. Okay. So these little nuggets of goodness, okay? Very nice. Now, your Italian grandmother would shoot you if, or hit you with a spoon, right, if you didn't take the next step. So we're gonna at least show you that. For that, I've got what's called a gnocchi board, okay? You also use this for making any ridge type pastas, okay? So it's basically a flat board with little ridges cut in it. You can't really see that on the camera too well, okay? These cost, you know, you can get them online for 10 bucks or less, right? And they last basically forever. So gnocchi board. If you don't want to deal with buying a gnocchi board, a fork will do, okay? So just a basic fork, okay? Now, either one is going to need a little flour on it. So I'm going to just flour my fork just a smidge so it doesn't stick. And I'm going to flour my gnocchi board just a smidge.
So chef, this is a direct quote.
Yes.
If you're going to freeze them before you cook them, should you freeze the nubbers or the extra dough in a ball?
No, you want to actually make them and freeze them as they're finished, okay? Because freezing the extra dough in a ball, once you thaw the dough out, is going to be so slack and kind of gooey, it's going to be hard to deal with, okay?
Perfect.
That's why I want to make my gnocchi today while the dough is fresh and warm. Okay. Now the next bit of this, and again, I'm going to just try to do this up front where I can see it. So I'm going to I've got my little nugget right here. I'm going to stick my thumb in one end of it, right? So it fits over the edge of my thumb like that. So that's a divot, right? And when you're cooking this, if you divot it, right, it cooks faster. Whoops, I just threw that on the ground. There we go. Okay, and then we're just going to roll it on the board. And I don't know if you can see, but there's a little ridges. Oh yes, cute. Now you want to do that 500 times? Well, it takes a little time. Okay. You can also lay it in the palm of your hand. Start with the heel of your fork. Make the little divot, and then just roll it across. Okay. So you can make one like that too.
You hold it up a little more?
Yeah, that one actually didn't turn out so beautiful.
Okay. Let's get a pretty one.
Yeah, so kind of hit it with the heel of the fork just to kind of put the divot or stick your thumb in it, right? And then just roll it gently with the fork. And you can see, or maybe you can't see, I've got the nice little ridges on the ends like that, okay? Yep. So the theory behind the ridges partly is because it looks good, right? But also partly that the ridged gnocchi hold on to the sauce better, right? So the sauce sticks in the ridges, or in this case today, we're going to make it with brown butter and herbs. So you'd have that happen. So I'm just going to go ahead and knock out a few of these, okay? So I'll do enough for our demo here. And then maybe for my little lunch. Okay, I'm going to redo this one because I like the smaller ridges. So if you're going to make like penne d'agate from fresh pasta dough, right? We have to roll the dough out, and then you cut it in pieces. And you have to have you have a little rolling pin. It's almost like a tiny dowel, right? You just kind of roll it in that. That's a lot of work. Have you guys seen the, what is the movie, The Big Night, right?
Yeah.
You actually see a really great demonstration of making tube pasta from flat pasta, right? It's pretty cool. A lot of freaking work, but cool. Okay, so there we go. I've got a nice, like, of a 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 16. There's 16 gnocchi right there. So I'm going to stop with my gnocchi making because we're already after 12:30. And we're going to get to the next step. So just gently take these off the board. Okay. Now, using the magic of television, I'm just going to turn my board over. Okay.
Was salt?
Say again?
Was salt added to the dough?
There was salt added to the dough. I'll send you a recipe for this after we get done today. So
absolutely.
Okay. So next we need a few things. Going to need some butter. because we got to have brown butter without butter. We're going to finish with a little cheese. In this case, I'm using Thousand Day Gouda because I happen to just have some on hand, and my Pecorino has run out. Okay. I would prefer to use Pecorino Romano or Parmigiano Reggiano. They both have more of a tang. I think they give you a nicer finish, especially when you're using butter as our sauce, really. Okay, but since I don't have those, I'm going to use this. Nutty, it's a little smoky, it tastes great. So now I've got some herbs. I've got some fresh chives that I just picked out of the garden today. You don't have to use chives. Chives are great. You can use, whoa, they're of course all rolling downhill here. You can use whatever you like in terms of herbs. If I had some rosemary, and I do, but my rosemary plant is took a little turn for the worse outside the other night because it got so stupid cold. But I do have some sage. My sage is coming along nice. So I got some sage. We got my chives. And then one of my favorite herbs, of course, is parsley. So we're going to go ahead and just roughly chop that. I don't want it super finely chopped. I want to know these herbs are in there, right? So I'm just going to chop them across. Okay. Beautiful. Add it up here. Okay. Ready to go. So now I'm ready to cook. So I've got boiling salted water. You say, well, how much salt should be in there? Well, you should at least be able to taste it, right? So I've seen the students do this how many times? You get a big pot of water and they're like, okay, salt the water, and they take a little pinch and they throw it in there, and it's like, no. Right? It should be salty. They say salty like the sea. I think that's a little too salty in this case, right? But you should at least be able to taste it. So dip a little spoon in it, give it a taste. You should know there's salt in there. Okay, so now we got salt in the dough, we got salt in the water, and then when we finish, I'll probably just sprinkle a little bit of the kosher salt on top, right? So now I got my water boiling. Make sure to bring that up so we got a full boil. And I'm just going to drop the gnocchi straight in. Okay. Woo-hoo. Oh, yeah. This aside over here, that's out of the way. Now gnocchi are, they're kind of a chunky pasta, so they're going to take a few minutes to cook. I would say we're going to look at about 5 minutes, right, total. You're cooking regular fresh pasta like fettuccine or linguine or caponini, right, angel hair pasta, any of that stuff, you're probably talking maybe 3 minutes for fresh pasta, right? Dry pasta of an equivalent type, probably going to be 6 or 7 minutes before you get it to a point where it's al dente or a little bit chewy but cooked. Right? This is going to be probably 5 minutes because they're chunky. All right, and I've got myself a nice little serving platter here. I've got my herbs. I've got some whole butter. I prefer to use unsalted butter for this, not because I think unsalted butter is better, but I think if I'm gonna want to control the amount of seasoning in it, if I use salted butter, then I have to think in terms of how am I going to take that into account, right? So when we cook this, right, now the gnocchi are going to go basically straight out of the water, going to drain them, and then we're going to go right into the brown butter. The brown butter takes just literally like a minute and a half to do. So I'm going to start preheating my pan back here. I forgot to pull my pepper. Spice back there. Want a little bit of black pepper for this. I'm not a huge fan of white pepper. Not going to worry about that. Okay, so I've got my plate. I've got my seasoning. I got salt and pepper. I've got my 1000-day Gouda, nice. I've got my little shredder, right? And here's my little block there for doing that. And I got my herbs. We're only going to frizzle the herbs in the brown butter for just a couple of seconds, right? Just to kind of release some of the flavor. So once I get the brown butter made, then add the herbs for about 2 or 3 seconds max, right? Oh, is that you, Max? Is that Max? No, it's not Max. Okay. And then I thought we were getting funny there. And then we'll toss in the gnocchi and put it in the plate. Shred the cheese over it at that point. If you want to add anything else to it, that's fine. If you would rather use tomato sauce, no problems. If you'd rather make it with a cream sauce, say if you got some cream and maybe some gorgonzola, right? So make a blue cheese sauce with that. That's terrific. Actually, my favorite way of doing this is with a spicy tomato sauce called arrabbiata, right? So think of it as a puttanesca sauce with a kick, right? So it's got olives and anchovies and tomato and hot pepper, right? And lots and lots and lots of olive oil. So it's a little bit oily and really, really tasty, right? So a good arrabbiata should bite you a little bit when you eat it. And some shrimp, just lightly sauteed in olive oil. That with the gnocchi is one of my very favorite things of all time. Of course, I can't do it with the shrimp now because my wife had a late onset shrimp allergy. Got into that a couple of years ago, so no more shrimp in the house, right? Darn it. Okay. I wish I could, maybe I can show you. Hold on. Just bear with me for a second. All right, Annie, I'm going to bring you over here. There we go with my pot of gnocchi. Sorry, it's kind of upside down and backwards, but there's the gnocchi, right? Simmering away.
I see it.
You can see it?
Yeah.
Beautiful. All right, almost done. Oh, it says something about assigning a host. Let's cancel that. I just messed with the screen because it's a touch screen. Okay, there we go. Back to where I was, right about there. I'm going to get a remote camera for some of this work. Be doing that pretty soon. Okay, so gnocchi's been in for a good 4 minutes or so. That's looking pretty good, actually. So I'm going to bring that off the heat. I'm going to switch my pan up. I just got a small saute pan here. Obviously, you can amp that up for as many gnocchi as you're going to do. They're only going to be in the pan for a few seconds, so I'm not too worried about that. You want to be generous with your butter. Okay, so now when I say brown butter, butter goes from melted butter to brown butter to burnt butter in seconds. Okay, especially if you're using a really hot pan. So don't get your pan too hot, right? As soon as you see the color change starting to happen in the butter, right, you have to watch it, right? Don't like put it in there and walk away, have a drink of wine, and then come back, because that's going to be nothing but problems, okay? You got to watch it. When it's ready, then you want to go to the next steps immediately, right? In with herbs, that's going to help bring the pan temperature right down, but you don't want the herbs in there for more than a couple of seconds, so be ready, right? So I got my dipper here. So I'm going to just have the gnocchi in my strainer, ready to go. Okay, got my pan hot. Starts melting immediately. Right. I haven't got it super hot, so we're just going to give it a couple of seconds. Again, I'd rather it take 30 or 40 seconds or a minute, rather than being all over within 10 seconds and me not being able to control what's going on. Okay.
So, Chef,
Yes.
Chris is asking, now she herself is gluten-free. So she was saying that Germans make bread dumplings, which that's her background, and I changed to potato gnocchi, which would work great. But what is she doing wrong when her gnocchi is not soft and fluffy?
It's not soft and fluffy. She's probably got her ratios of potato to drying ingredients. In this case, the drying ingredients are either your rice flour or potato starch or whatever you're using. Okay. So if your ratios are too high, then it's going to get a little clunky. Also, if you work the dough a lot, you saw how little I work the dough, right? That's really, really important. Okay. All right, I'm smelling it now. It smells just about perfect, right? So now I got my herbs in with a quick, you can hear them frizzling, right? And then with my gnocchi. Oh my gosh. Okay. Ooh, there it is in the pan. Oh yeah. Okay. Then I'm just gonna drop it into my plate. Okay, the plate's a little big for this, but that's okay. So now, again, I'll just bring this forward where you can see it. There's the beautiful gnocchi. Okay, and then just a little sprinkle. If you've got some Maldon salt or something like that, right, where you got some nice flaky salt, that's better, right? Because it's more of a seasoning or a finishing agent at that point rather than a seasoning agent. So I'm just going to give it a little pepper, like me a little black pepper on there. Then you can see I'm making a nice little snowstorm of the cheese. Again, you don't want to use a ton of cheese in here, but you want enough that you're going to know that it's all there. Excuse me. Okay. There we go.
Delish.
Oh, gosh. Now, the proof, as they say, is in the pudding. I didn't pick myself out a beer for today. I usually do that, but I didn't. I think this would go, I think with wine would be a better choice.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, yeah. Okay. They're light, they're tender, they're rich, right, with the butter and the cheese. So we've definitely achieved gnocchi goodness.
Fantastic.
Right.
Does anyone have any questions? I know we had a lot during the process, which was great, but does anyone have any more questions?
We have to have another one.
Chris says she knows what's for dinner now. So what kind of wine would you pair that with?
This I would go with a nice, tart, kind of refreshing white, maybe a South African Sauvignon Blanc, Fumé Blanc, right?
Mm-hmm.
So something that's got a lot of zing to it, a little grapefruit, a little apple.
Yeah.
I really would think that would pair really nicely with this. If you're gonna do it with a red, I was gonna do this with a red. I might do it with,
I go light on that.
maybe like an Old Vine Zinfandel, something along those
Are
lines.
you gonna go that heavy?
Yeah, maybe. Just because that's where my taste runs.
Mm-hmm.
But if you're going to do it, I would probably choose this for a group in a restaurant, maybe like something really light, like a Beaujolais Nouveau or something along those lines. Right? You can have Beaujolais Nouveau year round, but
Chris suggested a Burgundy, and I would trust her recommendation. She's completed wine professional level 3, so.
there you go. I would not say no to a Burgundy. And the thing about Burgundies is that they've got, for some reason, there's that, especially a decent Burgundy has that kind of barnyardy finish, especially when they're a little younger,
Mm-hmm.
right? And for some reason, that always just makes me think of like Tuscany or something, you know? Yes. Yes.
How many potatoes would you recommend per person in making this?
One potato per person. Yeah.
Okay.
That way you've got a nice size. That way you're probably going to have about 12 or 15 gnocchi this size per person, which is plenty, right? Especially if you've got a salad, you got some antipasti. Maybe you got your little tiramisu for dessert or a little gelato or something, right? Plus wine. Now you don't want your customers or your family to be walking out of the dining room feeling like they swallowed a basketball.
Mm-hmm.
So 12 to 15, plenty. For my 11-year-old son, and about double that. But I say one medium-sized potato, about 10, 12 ounces per person, right? So you get about, because you're going to lose some with the skin, right? So I got my scraped potatoes over here, right? You're going to lose probably about 3 ounces of that in terms of the skin, right? And I didn't scrape it all the way out to the edges.
But then, like you said, just make some potato skins and have a happy hour.
That's what we're going to do later.
Yeah.
I got a little bacon cooked off. Actually, it's tough this being on lockdown because we're eating too darn well. You know?
Yeah.
2 chefs in the house, and a lot of time on our hands. So, Any other questions or comments?
I think that was it from the peanut gallery. So they seem to really enjoy it, and we're surprised at how quick it was to actually make them.
Yeah, they're fast.
Yeah. So before we do wrap up today, do you have anything you would like to say, Chef, before we wrap up, or?
Again, just want to reiterate, it's better to work with this dough while it's fresh than if you want to hold it for any length of time. Work with it now, put it in the freezer. You want to freeze it on a sheet pan. You don't want to put tons of flour on it, right? Better that you put it lightly coated in flour, spread it out on a sheet pan or a baking sheet of some sort. Put it in the freezer where it's got some room to freeze separately, and then after it's frozen, then you can just take it back off the sheet, put it into a tight container or a bag, and put it back in the freezer, and you can hold it for weeks, right? That way.
Perfect. And then reach out to me at taste@nl.edu. Chef's going to be sending me the recipe, so if you want a printed copy of his recipe, I can get that to you as soon as I have it. And then before we conclude today, unfortunately, I just wanted to share that the Kendall College at NLU community was saddened to hear that we lost a student this weekend. And Jefferson Rodriguez Martinez was a baking and pastry student who was continuing on to get his hospitality degree and was in the capstone class. He was actually on a taste talk a couple of weeks ago as one of the students who was part of the teams. He was on the team that was sharing how to prepare a delicious omelet. And we are, definitely, we are all saddened to have lost a student and to lose such a cheerful and shining star, and that the rest of the world isn't going to get to enjoy any of the amazing baking and pastry creations that he had been making over the years that he'd been at Kendall. So anyone who's part of Kendall College or NLU, if you do feel the need to talk to someone or anything, please reach out to me. I can get you the contact information if you don't have it and you really feel the need to talk to someone. So I really felt that needed to be acknowledged today, and we're very happy that he actually got to be part of the Taste Talks with us. So
thanks for bringing it up. I appreciate that you did.
Yeah. So thank you all so much. Tomorrow, we're actually going to have one of our baking and pastry instructors, Chef Heidi, doing bagels with us. So we're really excited to see something new and something different. And we have a lot of things on deck for this week, so we hope to see you all again. Thank you all so much. All right.
Thanks again.
Bye.
See you another day.